Y'all, I am really excited to have you here with me this week. We're starting something totally new, a new segment. It is don't miss it. You're not going to miss it because you're listening, but you're not going to want to miss it going forward because I don't know if anyone else does this, but my friend Kris Journey loves the asteroids and dwarf planets, which we'll get to what that is in a sec. And we're going to be doing a monthly, I think I'm going to call it the Podcasteroid episode. Me and Kris, we're going to be talking about what's going on in the sky and what the horoscope is based on the asteroids, the asteroid goddesses, the centaurs, and the dwarf planets, and how they react and interact with the main planets that we have, both the traditional and the modern planets. But it's really cool. She's an expert. She loves to use the asteroids and the dwarf planets in her readings, mostly asteroid goddesses. And she's amazing. So, Kris Journey is an astrologer in upstate New York who helps clients worldwide love themselves, their relationships, and their lives. You can connect with her at www.journeywomanastro.com and on Instagram at journeywoman.astrology. Now, what is an asteroid? Well, an asteroid, according to Google, is sometimes called a minor planet, and they are rocky remnants left over from the early formation of our solar system about 4.6 billion years ago. Most of this ancient space rubble can be found orbiting our sun between Mars and Jupiter within the main asteroid belt. And so they have their own orbits, but they orbit between the planets for the most part. And they're big enough to be seen with telescopes and things like that. And they, like the planets, have their own archetypes and their own stories and their own cycles, synodic cycles, cycles around the sun and around Earth and things like that. So they come up at different points in our life and they mean different things. And they're really, really powerful. You can use them in your personal horoscopes in astrology or on what we call a mundane level to kind of see what's going on in the world. We talk about all that. We talk about how to use it personally on an individual level. And we also talk about how to use these asteroids and dwarf planet energies, the transits, the aspects to them, what signs they're in, on both a personal, individual, and a collective level. Of course, always on how to thrive personally while making the world a better place. And let's see. So now a dwarf planet, because I know I said we would talk about what that is. That is a celestial body resembling a small planet, but lacking certain technical criteria that are required for it to be classified as such. And so some of these dwarf planets are goddesses, and so that's why we bring it in. So I could call this the goddess report, we could call this the podcasteroid. So thank you to Kris's friend, fellow writer. Kris is also a writer who suggested that. Let me know in the comments or send me an email at hi@taylorshuler.com and let me know, what do you want this segment to be called once you listen to the whole thing. So those were the astronomical definitions of a dwarf planet and an asteroid. And I'll just let you know, the dwarf planets, the 9 main ones that we look at, and we didn't look at all of them in this episode, but that we might talk about, are Ceres, who is the goddess of the harvest, who is the mother of Persephone, who was stolen, went down into the underworld. And then she mourned, and that's why there are some times when we can't just harvest all the time. Abundance has cycles. There are cycles of lack and abundance. And then Pluto is one of those controversial ones where most of us still think Pluto's a planet. So I'm not really going to say Pluto, but technically right now, according to NASA, Pluto's a dwarf planet. This one, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. Quaoar, if I got it right, let me know. Sedna, Orcus, Haumea, Eris, Makemake, and Gong. And so these are small planetary mass objects that are in direct orbit of the sun. They're smaller than any of the 8 classical planets, but they still are a world in their own right. That's according to the source of all truth. just joking, Wikipedia. Not really joking, because like it's where we get our information most of the time these days. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let us know what you think. We will be back with a February forecast, next month's forecast very soon. So stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoy this new segment. Hey there, welcome back. I'm here with Kris, and we're here to talk with you about the asteroids.
Hi, Taylor. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here having this conversation. You are the asteroid and goddess expert, and I think we might also talk about some dwarf planets, the technical term. So we wanted to do a little like asteroid goddess dwarf planet energy update based on some of the like most prevalent, or like the energies we're going to feel the most this month. And we plan to do this like every month. If there's other content that you all want to see or hear from us, like just let us know. We've got some ideas for some other episodes potentially. Like, would you like to know why they're important or how to use them in your chart, things like that. So yeah, so Kris, tell us, like, what are we talking about? What are the asteroids? What are the goddesses? What are the dwarf planets? Why should we care? Why do you like them?
Okay. Well, so I I studied with a teacher who worked with Ceres, Pallas, Juno, Vesta, Chiron, and Black Moon Lilith. And
And what was her
her
name?
name was Dawn Bagrody. Her website, theinnerwheel.com. She passed away, sadly, in 2017. But I feel very honored to have been able to study with her. She was amazing. And she, of course, Demetra George also wrote the classic book, Goddess Asteroids, about Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta. And so Demetra George is, of course, another amazing resource for the feminine asteroids, or the goddess asteroids. And so, my personal take, my theory is that, just my observation is that it's really second wave feminism in the 1970s that just became interested in why these asteroids named after feminine goddesses. And so the first 4 asteroids discovered early 1800s were Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta. And Black Moon Lilith is just too fascinating to leave out. And then why Chiron gets thrown into the mix of all this, I'm not entirely sure, but Chiron is also very fascinating to work with. And I think that for me, what I always say is that the asteroids bring a nuance and a specificity to a chart that the traditional planets and the moderns just, you can get a tremendous amount of information out of the traditionals and the moderns, but when you start to work with the asteroids, it's pretty remarkable, the insights that come out of them. So, and of course, I also just like being able to bring in their stories and the mythology and the culture. I think it's a wonderful counterpoint.
Do you have a favorite, either by natal, like something natally that you like to look at, or by transit, just like mundane, what's going on in the world that everyone might experience?
I would say personally that I do have Juno prominent in my chart. I have a Mercury, Mars, well, I have a stellium in Libra, Mercury, Mars, Pluto. Mercury and Mars are only a few minutes apart. And so I have Mercury, Mars, and Juno all within a few minutes of one another. My orientation toward the world has always been one of, just to briefly describe what Juno can be about. So all of the asteroids have various layers of archetypal meaning, just like all of the astrological archetypes. But Juno, one of her sort of levels of meaning can be an activism, caring about justice, and sort of wanting to right wrongs. caring about the underdog. We see it prominent in the charts of the prominent activists like Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and I have had, you know, alongside my interest in astrology, I've had a career in progressive media. So my Mercury Mars is makes me a warrior with words. Mercury Mars Juno.
I like that. It's really interesting. I also have a pretty prominent Juno in my chart because it's pretty close to my North Node, and my North Node is close to my ascendant. And I'm just in my Juno return right now, so I'm like seeing what that feels like. So I like Juno a lot, and I can totally relate to the activist aspect. I think that's something that we have in common for sure. It's just like,
yeah,
you know, wanting to make the world a better place and taking, like, you know, this is a difficult word because everyone has a different definition of it and different emotional reactions to it, but like a feminist approach, you know, like a progressive, want to make the world a better place kind of POV point of view on how we access the chart and just like life in general.
Yeah. And what I like about it, what I like about Juno is that it's, you know, social justice warriors can get a bad rap, but this fundamental sort of, sometimes things just aren't right. And I think Juno taps into that archetype of kind of like, whether it's speaking truth to power or just this human need to fight for what's right sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because I just had a solar return reading and I was reminded. I feel like I shouldn't say this. I'm putting myself on blast by saying this because it's going to come across wrong. And I don't mean it like this is going on in my life right now. But I was reminded of the whole story of Juno, and that one of the things with Juno is that she was the wife of Zeus. And as the wife of Zeus, Zeus was a philanderer. And so she would go and like kill people. You know, like she would go, well, I don't know if she really killed them, but like she would go after his lovers.
I bet she did.
She would go after them and be like, this isn't cool. And then she'd, you know, smite him. Well, I don't know if she could really, but like she'd go after him too and be like, WTF are you doing? I'm the wife here. And
right.
It's unjust for you to be doing this stuff. So it's kind of interesting to think about in that sense too, that it's like partnership, it could be romance, it could be this activism, it's like fighting for what's right. But it's also the sense of like, you know, I've been getting back into the Tao lately, and like I like the Wayne Dyer book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. And it's all about, you know, the Tao is all about non-attachment. And when you are attached to something, you want to control it. And we in this life are attached to things. We're attached to people. We have feelings, we have emotions, we have desires and wants. We make agreements. And I think Juno might be about like, in the context of whatever agreement, whether it's like a love agreement or a social contract, it's like then saying, hey, you've gone against this contract that we have. And that's why I'm exerting some or expressing some thoughts about like control and like a reaction, not necessarily judgmental, but like a gut reaction to this doesn't feel right. And so because it doesn't feel right, I have to say something about it. I have to do something about it. We need to have a conversation about it because we are in relationship with one another, with the planet. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Well, so Juno had some role as a protector of the community, protector of the common good. And I think that that's where the activist angle kind of comes from, personally. And I think that there's a sense of like of righteous anger that in feeling betrayed or having power dynamics be abused. I feel like that's sort of what Juno represents, in some cases. But the other prominent meaning of Juno that you're referring to is she has somehow morphed into becoming the asteroid that represents marriage or long-term partnership. And the way that I have heard it described is it's not just a fling or a year or two relationship. This is like the 10-year, the 20-year, the lifelong, because it's a contract in the eyes of society. Um,
Yeah. So should we just jump into like some of the major energies that are going on this month?
sure, absolutely. And just to sort of wrap up, I mean, of course we could talk about any of them, we could
Yeah.
for a while, but we jumped into Juno, but yeah, the first four discovered were Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta, and I think that that's why um feminists in the 60s and 70s started to sort of look at them and say, what's going on with these? They're so interesting. And, today, many people work with the asteroids, but still not quite as many as maybe could. So, so yeah, that's what we're here to do. We're here to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Transit-wise.
And I think I was like triggered to like go into this stuff because I think one of the biggest things going on this month, and maybe we could just like name the big things going on this month and then we can jump into it. But one of them is
Okay.
Jupiter and Juno making a conjunction, right? So Juno will meet up with Jupiter in Aries this month, and we'll be feeling that energy. I think we're also going to be feeling Pallas sextile Uranus, Lilith opposite Venus. Juno's also going to sextile Pluto, and then we've got Pallas square to Chiron. So those are some of the big things. Was there anything else that I was missing that was on your list?
I think that's great. And I do think the Juno Jupiter conjunction is probably the most significant of the month, but yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So it looks like first we're going to have Juno conjunct Jupiter. The first time we'll see it is January 19th, and it's probably already in orb. We're feeling it because I think today, which is January 13th, I think it's going into Aries today, and Jupiter's at 2 or 3 degrees of Aries already. And we'll probably still feel that orb probably through the end of January, wouldn't you say? Even though it's like till January 24th, it's kind of exact.
Uh, yeah, and I always say that it, whatever happens when on those days when it's within that 1 degree or so orb, it tends to, even if it's a month or several months down the road, that we look back in retrospect and we say, oh, that was the start, that was the seed, so I feel like uh, this energy of the Jupiter Juno this month could have an impact quite some ways down the line.
Yeah. So what are you thinking about this Juno and Jupiter? What are the maybe we could start with like the archetype of Jupiter. How do you see Jupiter? Because we talked a little bit about Juno.
So we're looking at the 19th.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when it's just gets into that 1 degree orb of a conjunction on January 19. So to me, this the chart, so a Jupiter Juno conjunction to me says a number of things, especially in Aries. Jupiter, we know, expands what it touches. Jupiter at the start of Aries is going to be full of energy, just raring to go. And Jupiter conjunct Juno, to me, I look at this and I think either this is commitment in partnership, and it could be, and so it's just like the seventh house rules, like business relationships. It could be various types of partnership. It doesn't have to be romantic. It could be, you enter into a business agreement with somebody. But I see partnership highlighted, romantic or otherwise. And I also look at that, and I think there is potential for some level of activism, or maybe some victory around uh, around civil rights, or injustice on some level.
Yeah.
Whether maybe it's heightened level of protest, or maybe it's an actual victory of some kind, some sort of step forward for the
Yeah.
community, for the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. There's so much going on. And I mean, I'm not going to get ahead of us, but like I'll just name that Jupiter is
Yeah.
going to meet up with Chiron in Aries in March, on March 11th. And the same day, Venus, 3 hours earlier, Venus will be conjunct Eris. And those are like all of these things, nothing happens in a vacuum. And I think that all of these things are speaking to a story. And we get this first trigger of the Jupiter Juno by like blowing up, expanding Jupiter, bringing attention to the need for healing, the need for teaching, the need for, I don't know, bringing attention to the Juno topics, the partnerships, the things that are just unjust and wrong, and bringing attention to them. The break in our social contract, but also Aries, right? Aries is how we are, it's the I am, the I be, I just exist, and I have my individual sovereignty, and I deserve certain things just because I'm a human being, just because I'm alive here on earth. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that again now, that just coming to light. And my whole thing, at least right now, and a lot of it's just about my own chart, I find more and more the more every day, every second I'm in astrology, I'm like, yeah, this is a me thing, but it's also a we thing, which is a Jupiter Juno thing too.
Personal is political.
Yeah, it's about like universal basic income. It's about like the right to rest. It's about individual sovereignty. It's about like our human rights, the right to access like housing and water and food, and not have to work ourselves to the bone. And then, I think right now our attention is being brought to the issues that are really unjust on an individual level, and how like the social contract, if you want to think of like Juno and Jupiter as the social contract, because Jupiter's an outer planet. So I don't want to say it's generational, but it's like a year long generation, right? Like the kids you went to school with type of generation. And Juno is a 4.3 year transit. So it's also like semi generational in a sense. So if you want to think about the social contract, Jupiter, Juno, and then in Aries, how that impacts us on an individual level, I think that's what's coming up. And so I know, like in the news today, I saw finally Biden has said something about what the new student loan repayment plan will look like starting in June or July in the US, of 2023, and how it's going to be a little bit less. And they're raising like the floor of the income, and then reducing the amount you have to pay back from 15% of quote unquote disposable income, which is bullshit, to 5%, which is better. It's an improvement in our Aries condition, and
almost Scandinavian,
right? Well,
yeah.
I don't know what they do in Scandinavia. I mean, I know I went to grad school with some folks, and like they got paid to be in school. They got
yeah.
They really didn't come out of pocket at all. So
right. I think they die still paying off their loans. They never expect to. But also it's so low, it's such a low portion of their income that it doesn't, and everyone's just like, it's fine.
yeah,
Education is a human right.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not like a capitalist system of exploitation and ability to like just make money and be greedy. Because the other side of Aries is like, it's me, and then there's greed. I don't think we talk about greed,
Right.
but I think if Jupiter in Aries could be a signature for greed. And I say that because I've got Jupiter in Aries, so there's no shade here for anyone who has it. But if you think about it, it's like a lot for an individual. So I mean, that's just a literal archetypal interpretation of it.
With Aries, the first sign of the traditional zodiac, it's like the first signs of spring. It's the energy of it's just a sort of unbridled energy, which can be really wonderful sometimes, but Jupiter in Aries is like doubling down on that potential for self-interested action. Say. Yeah.
Interesting. So that's the energy that we've got from like January 19th to the 24th, give or take like a couple days.
Yeah, and if we're using the 1 degree orbs, yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, I might think, and we should look at that. There's a really fun chart with when Venus is conjunct Saturn. That's the 22nd.
All right. Pull that up. I'll share my screen.
Awesome.
Cool. So I have the chart set for Tucson at 3:26 p.m. So the ascendant and midheaven don't really matter so much, but you can see that we've got Venus and Saturn both at 24 degrees of Aquarius. Here we've got 47 and 48 minutes of Aquarius, and we've got the moon applying to a conjunction with Saturn, and then it'll meet up with Venus. So we're really going to be feeling that Saturn Venus conjunction. And what's your interpretation of the Saturn Venus conjunction?
Well, so we talked about this a bit, right? And there's a lot going on in this chart because Saturn Venus can feel alienating, sense of feeling unloved, highlighting maybe feeling isolated, but it could also so many of the archetypes are almost flip sides of one another, and this could also be romantic commitment, a serious commitment to some kind of partnership. So we've got this Saturn making Venus very serious conjunction, and then we've got the Jupiter Juno at the same time, and we were saying that like it could either be it looks like a marriage proposal to me on one level. Like it's a great day to propose to someone.
Or a deep disappointment that they didn't propose and now you're stuck here and you're like, I got to reassess my life and let go of you, buddy, because this ain't working. We're not on the same pace. We're not on the same page. We're not in the same place.
I feel like if you're really serious about somebody and you're thinking about it this month,
that's a good day for it.
Yeah, right around the 22nd. It's a great day.
It's definitely a good day for it. What
for
else?
A long marriage.
Yeah.
Long partnership.
Yeah. And I think there's like an ear aspect ish here where it's like the Saturn moon. An ear is like when you have two semi sextiles, so 30-degree aspects and then a sextile. I believe that's what it is. And so that puts the Venus Saturn moon at the focal point of the ear, making that the part that listens. So it means I really seriously can hear you, relate to you, like seriously is Saturn, feel is the moon, and Venus is relate. And so you can hear your partner, you can hear one another on this really deeply, responsibly emotional, almost intuitive relational level, if you want to think about it like that. But at the same time, I think Moon Saturn can be very cold and distant. It can be, you know what, it's easier to just like miss this. It's easier to avoid this. It's easier not to do it because being emotionally vulnerable is also very Saturnian. And Saturnian in the sense of like it's difficult, it's really hard work, and you have to be super mature and responsible in order to be vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when we've got Mercury trying the nodes in this chart and Sun, leaving that conjunction with Pluto.
Yeah.
So there's it's almost like communication is highlighted. That's the path forward with Mercury and the nodes there. But but there's some kind of profound shift happening with the Sun Pluto as well, with that conjunction just a few days before this.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a
on
profound.
on the 18th. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good. Yeah, because some Pluto, it's like if you've had a Pluto transit, especially a Sun Pluto transit, because to your natal chart, because that's what we're having, in the sky at this time, that it is about confidence. Like you don't come out if you come out of a Sun Pluto transit and you're not confident, I don't know how you did it wrong. Maybe it sounds a little judgmental. I don't mean it like that, but it's like I feel like you must come out like because otherwise you really come out destroyed because it strips everything away. I don't want to say it's an ego death totally, but I'm because your ego might not be totally destroyed, but you certainly have to encounter your own ego and get all your stuff stripped away because when I was oh gosh, when I was in college, I was with a group of people. I won't call anyone out, but I'll just say I was with a group of people and they had this phrase, break you down to build you up again. And that's really what it is about. And
That's very Plutonian. That's very Pluto. Yeah.
right, like I got to build you down to break you down to build you back up again. And I think that's what Pluto and the sun does. It gets really deep and can pull out that deep information. And the moon was just there too. So the moon, a day and a half before, because 17 degrees is about a day and a half, was with the with Pluto and the sun.
Right.
And so the moon felt Pluto too, which is very like emotionally intense. And then the sun and the moon together, that's a new moon. This is our lunar new year, by the way. So that's kind of a cool thing to think about. Like our lunar new year has this sun, Pluto, and Saturn, Venus. So in this lunar new year, also known as Chinese New Year, we're going forward with like this very intense ability to have our soul shine or have our purpose be intense. And then also Venus, Saturn, let go of any relationships, commitments, desires, extra sweetnesses that no longer support our strengthening or our structure or are helpful in our relationships. And the moon going between the two, I think speaks to that a lot.
Absolutely. And this is so with the Sun Pluto conjunction on a day-to-day level, that could be a day of significant shifts, transformation, change. But the kind of the description were going into, that feels like Pluto over the sun, like a Pluto transiting your sun. That's a really profound transformation.
Yeah.
Right? Did I miss? You said that.
No,
That
yeah.
was
Yeah.
okay.
Totally.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, the other thing that strikes me um, is that the Neptune Vesta conjunction at 22 and 23 Pisces, because that to me, so Vesta can be what we consider sacred, what we're devoted to, and Neptune, one element of Neptune, obviously is spirituality, and the divine in a way. And so with Neptune conjunct Vesta, I feel like another sort of to me, this is a positive side of this chart, is that there's something that we're very serious about, something that we consider sacred, we hold sacred, and it inspires us, with Neptune going on, just to add to the sort of seriousness of that Venus Saturn, maybe take it up a notch even, because now it's spiritual somehow. It's about what inspires us.
Yeah, like our hopes and our dreams,
Yeah.
being part of that sacred fire we tend to. And I like to think of Vesta also as a room of one's own almost. It's like because when you're tending a sacred fire, there can't be any distractions. And literally sometimes people do, like where you see Vesta is where they need their own space, they need their own room, it's very private. Like it could be a journal, it could be a relationship with your child if it's in the fifth house. You know, it could be like if you're an artist and it's in your fifth house, it could be like, you know, you really have like a studio in your backyard that you retreat to, and you don't like it when someone comes in and looks at your art before it's done.
Right.
If it's in the 10th house, like maybe you know, your career, your profession, your reputation is really precious to you. And so it can be both like an increase in how spiritual it feels and an increase in our dreams being sacred, or it could be like a dissolution of what used to be the thing that we held sacred too. And this is going to be on a societal level, right? So like, how are we changing what we hold sacred in order to achieve Pisces goals of collective compassion and what are some other Pisces things besides collective compassion? Like caring, I think it's caring for people who suffer. So like refugees, victims, like people who are not able to completely provide for themselves within like capitalism, which is most of us.
I love that. Well, and Neptune and Pisces, I mean, it's an incredibly spiritual transit. And I think that as Neptune has transited Pisces, we've seen the growth of alternative spiritualities,
Yeah.
a massive, pretty much massive explosion of interest in in alternative spirituality that we haven't seen since the last time Neptune was in Pisces, which was in the 1800s during um, the rise of spiritualism, I believe. So,
You know, you just got
so
me thinking about something else, and I think that that is the legalization um of psychedelics and
psychedelics. Yeah.
an increase in the types of medications that we hold up or esteem or really need in order to keep going. But psychedelics really, because it's like the access to the sacred through these mediums. So like shamanic things, especially. So like microdosing mushrooms, or I think people are like doing microdosing ketamine. Is that a thing? I might be
Oh
confusing
gosh,
it.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I could be saying it
I don't
wrong.
keep up.
But also like ayahuasca ceremonies and
Right.
peyote, and certainly we've seen marijuana. So, you know, I don't really follow it, but I don't think marijuana is legal in all the states. But maybe we see like another push,
A number of them,
or
yeah.
like a law, you know, because Venus, so Saturn is can be our laws and the structure of our society, and Venus could be, you know, coming to soften the hearts of the lawmakers, maybe, and like relate to one another. So this is kind of off topic, but I was just reminded of uh daylight savings time in the United States ending, and it was fascinating to me because like the article that came up when I googled it, because I was just like, do we spring ahead or do we not fall back? And apparently we spring ahead and then we're done, we don't fall back again. It just stays like that. And the article that came up was like Marco Rubio, a quote from him, and he's a conservative Republican in the United States, and he's a bit of an asshole, basically. Sorry if you like him, but I'm just gonna say what I gotta say. And his quote though was like, we should just do away with this foolishness. And I was like, that sounds really reasonable to me, you know, coming from someone that I've perceived as an asshole saying something that's really reasonable. And so I wonder if this, you know, Vesta Neptune could be another one of those with the Saturn moon Venus of like coming together. And the other thing that he said was not just like, let's get rid of this foolishness, because he said it helps us not be wild and crazy because our clocks go off, our kids take a week or two to adjust, we all feel weird, it affects our bodies, a moon thing. But also he did say, you know, this is a small thing and we can both reach across the aisle, you know, Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, progressives, etc., and come together to get this done. And he said, if we get this done, perhaps there's hope that we can get other bigger things done in the future. And so if you see the government as a sacred fire that we tend to, because Vesta really was like the Vestal fire, and that Vestal fire was to keep the government going, or keep society going, because where they tended this fire purified the water and it kept the grains and the food clean. So it really was like this center point of our government in a pretty big way. And so I wonder if we'll see something like that happen. That would be nice.
Well, I love thinking of that conjunction as hope. Vesta and Neptune. It does feel like hope. It feels very inspiring. In Pisces, especially. It's idealistic. It's idealistic
to come together and reach across the aisle, because it's getting rid of our boundaries, right? Neptune, Pisces gets rid of our boundaries.
And like it's appealing to our highest values.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, especially, I mean, this one, it's funny because like it doesn't matter where it's at in the chart, but the way that I'm showing the chart right now, it does show it like right on the midheaven, the high point of the chart. And so the way we're talking about it is in the same way that it is, which is idealistic and aspirational and truth and justice and all of that. And it's technically in the ninth house of, where we see our laws and lawyers and things like that. And then we've got Jupiter, Juno, Chiron, Aries in the 10th there. And again, I know the houses don't matter, but I'm just saying divination works, and the fact that the chart came up with this means something, so we're just going to go with it. And yeah, we are talking about it in this kind of way, this like, disruption. Aries, Chiron, of something that's deeply hurtful and wounding. Juno, our social contract with one another. Jupiter is the lawmaker. I mean, Saturn can be too, but Jupiter is as well. And Alice Barclaycott in Postcolonial Astrology gives a great treatment to how Jupiter and Saturn relate in terms of the law, and like what kinds of law Jupiter is versus what kinds of law Saturn is. Saturn is natural law, and Jupiter is the man-made laws that we have now. And so, but Jupiter also represents truth and justice and honor and doing what's honorable. And so seeing Jupiter in there, in Aries in the 10th house, we see truth come out in the 10th house. And so then you have Jupiter there, and it's another truth. And Aries is about our individual rights and sovereignty. And so that's another reason why this is kind of idealistic. It's like addressing our social contract, our deepest wounds, and disrupting it, and doing the right thing with man-made laws that relate Venus to our natural Saturn laws as well.
It's to go back to the psychedelics. I love thinking about that in the context of Neptune and Pisces. And Neptune's going to move out of Pisces next year, I think by 2025, right? Is it? When does Neptune?
Neptune moves into Aries in late 2025, but yeah. Pretty sure.
Ephemera. But
no, in mid 2025, I think, because Saturn enters Aries in July of 2025 for the first time, and Neptune always stays ahead of Saturn.
Here we go. April 2025.
Yeah.
Okay, for Neptune.
Thank you.
But I'm not convinced it's not a retrograde.
It might retrograde, but it doesn't retrograde until after Saturn catches up to it on February 20th of 2026. Okay.
So first entrance is April 2025 into Aries.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we've got just a very little amount of time left with Neptune in Pisces, but this idea of healing, Chiron is about our deepest wounds. Juno is about justice around those wounds. And we've had this, I think, real resurgence of interest in alternative forms of healing. And I think spirituality in its highest sense can be profoundly healing. And so in this sort of the alternative spiritualities that Neptune and Pisces represent, the psychedelics to me fit in perfectly. They're being used for PTSD. This is
yeah. Totally. I'm getting all these like hints. I don't follow this very closely, so maybe someone's like, duh, Taylor, of course, but I don't follow this. I'm just picking up on like little hints I see here and there that the government will be passing some kind of law to make more psychedelics more available in the United
Right now,
States.
I don't even think they're allowed to do research because it's still like a Schedule 1 or something.
Which is
Marijuana.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I was
Yeah.
having a conversation the other day, and I'll just say it was my mom. And she was like, well, Taylor, I was watching MSNBC, and I get my seatbelt on when she starts talking about that, because I'm like, where are we going now? And she's like, it's so wonderful. They're gonna have these new we passed a $4 billion package and we passed an $11 billion package. And I'm getting irate hearing these numbers, because I'm thinking, like, how much is their student loan debt that we could use billions of dollars to like forgive, but instead we're going to make people pay it back. And we're giving our money to, whether it be other countries or to create defense weapons. And the thing that she was talking about in like one of these $1 billion packages was this equipment, which is very Pluto going into Aquarius, which is going to happen in March, and then happen again next year. But this technology that will X-ray your car or X-ray like a semi truck while it's driving. So there'll be these like government vehicles on major highways, apparently, from like Mexico or Canada or port cities. I have no idea where from. I'm just guessing. I'm ad-libbing now. But it will like X-ray and then do some other sort of like visual sensing that will give the government then, or maybe the military, I'm not sure who, one and the same, doesn't really matter, information about what's in the vehicle. Is it people? Is it fentanyl? Is it drugs? Is it who knows what? And I'm thinking, first of all, you can't just be sending X-rays through people on the
It doesn't
road.
sound
It's
legal.
very damaging to our bodies. Like, everyone will have bones with lots of holes in them and our brains will fry. Like, that's dangerous, first of all. And second
Mom,
of
did you
all,
get this right?
right? And I know. Okay, so like who knows? I could be like totally off. But then I was like, also, the point of this is that if the government were to spend all this money, which is fucking ridiculous, why wouldn't they just change the law? Because people are hiding drugs and putting fentanyl into other drugs, because we don't have a model like they have in Portugal where people can go get drugs at a center and shoot up or get their fix in a safe environment with clean needles and a safe place and people watching and observing them, so that, you know, they can really care for them and make sure they're not overdosing, and then eventually wean them off of it, you know, like a methadone clinic. Like, you have methadone at the same place that you have heroin or
Sure.
meth or whatever it is the person wants. And then you end up getting the trucks off the road, because who would buy street drugs when you could get drugs for free that you know are clean at a government run
Much more safely.
facility?
Yeah.
And then you don't
Yeah.
have to spend money on creating technology and defense weapons and all of this stuff that violates our privacy and violates our rights in order to fight something that we just made illegal. And that's why it's a problem. Just change the law and then it'll be fine. And
I
this,
love it.
right?
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I love that we're talking about this with Neptune, and we didn't even plan it, because the, Neptune, I find this so fascinating. Neptune is both spirituality and addiction in the chart. It
Yeah.
rules both. And I think that there's something so profound and sort of moving about that, because in both spirituality and drug use, we are reaching for something outside of ourselves. We're seeking, we're looking for escape or oblivion in drugs. And in spirituality, if this is like a higher expression of Neptune, we can turn our problems and our troubles over to a higher power. So there's a different sort of giving up there, but they're sort of two sides of the same coin, the addiction and the spirituality on some level. That I think is it's a profound connection. And I love that Neptune in Pisces is about using drugs to aid healing and spirituality. Um, these traditional forms of medicine have come back. And I think it's about treating them with the respect that they deserve. You know, I do have to say that it kind of does bother me that there's like ayahuasca tourism, because that really,
It's
I think,
problematic. Yeah.
yeah, and it's problematic on so many levels. Um, but even just on the personal level, like if we don't take these experiences seriously, I think they have the potential to destroy us, which is also Neptune. Like, because these are powerful, powerful drugs.
Yeah.
And I've seen people lose their minds because of acid use, way too much acid. So
Yes.
personally,
Yeah. Yeah. It can dissolve us away. It can
I think
connect
that's,
us to a higher
yes,
purpose, but it can also dissolve us away. And it's not for
we get
everybody.
lost. Yeah.
Yeah. And
The
because
oblivion.
Neptune can be sensitivity too, right? And it can be
Yeah.
poison. And so if you have a sensitivity or you take too much, you OD, that's poison. Um, and so it's a very delicate balance, and like it's just not for everybody. And I don't want to say you can or can't see it in a natal chart. I mean, there's certain things about sensitivity that you can see in a natal chart, but like whether or not someone should be taking drugs, I guess you can see that too sometimes, like how it could stand out to you to be like really bad. um but sometimes it shows up as like other people in your life have it really bad, and so then you end up not doing it, and that happens to be good for you, like whether it's alcohol or drugs or anything. Like I get a lot of clients that have Neptune South Node, period. I've got a ton of Neptune South Node people coming into my life, and all I have to say to them is like, it's really difficult to grow up in a household with alcohol or substance abuse, and they go,
Yep.
mouth shut
Oh,
completely, just and the nod.
yeah.
And it's real. It because
When
South
when I have Neptune conjunct Moon, um, and I think that part of why I find this connection between spirituality, creativity, and addiction so interesting. I think they call it, they're the same human, like fundamental human needs, um, to be subsumed, to be part of something larger than ourselves.
Yeah. And you know what? I think we skipped over something that was happening before, and that's the Juno sextile Pluto. So that would look like Juno is going to be sextile Pluto. Excuse me, from
But yeah, that Saturn conjunct Venus in this chart maybe is in the 22nd chart is what's making me say, well, you got to be serious about this.
yeah. So it looks like the Juno Pluto was exact on January 10th, 11th ish. And it's an out of sign sextile. I don't know if I just said conjunct. I meant sextile. So
Textile. Yep.
yeah.
January 10th.
And basically Pluto is intensity, and it's like digging down these deep desires. It digging up the wealth that is like hidden very deep under the earth. And so I wonder if it can be like the intensity of our relational or social agreements, or having just an increased intensity around the Juno aspects, because it's still sextile, it's still within orb of a sextile, even at the end of the month, because Juno's not moving like, I mean, okay, let's say that's about 8 degrees on January 26th after it meets up with Jupiter.
Tarnus uses 15, but 10, 15 degrees.
Oh,
So
okay. All right. So then, like,
maybe
through the end
maybe
of
it's 10
January.
separating, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely through the end of January. And then I guess next month we'll talk about Juno and Chiron meeting up. And then we could talk about Juno Eris too, because that'd be really interesting, because that is going to be like every 5 years. It's going to happen. Once a year, you'll get a hard aspect, either a square or an opposition or a conjunction. I mean, maybe 1.25 years about approximately, if it's every 5 years that they're conjunct. So that might be interesting to look at. What other
A
aspects?
Juno Eris conjunction.
Yeah.
You're saying?
Juno Chiron
Yeah.
and Juno Aries.
Yeah.
Happen in February.
And, and just to go back to that 20-second chart, a couple things you said the other day when we first looked at this was, it's interesting because to go back to the potential for commitment in this chart, serious commitment, it also there, it's like it could go either way. It could be a breakup being a
Yep.
Saturn because of too much pressure, you said. Jupiter, Juno. Because Jupiter blows up what it touches. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where I think, oh, Jupiter's coming along and everybody's gonna get along and make a commitment. And no, Jupiter creates, it's a breakup. Jupiter over the descendant, say, transiting the descendant, and all of a sudden the relationship falls apart. It doesn't come together. It falls apart.
And Sun Pluto there's an intensity. Yeah. We're shining a light on how intense this is. And then the Jupiter Juno is like, hey, let's do this or not. And if you want to use that 10-degree orb, you've got both Jupiter and Juno within orb of Chiron, which is like, I'm sorry, but this just like hurts me in that place that I can't get over. And so I think regardless, you can look at it as a commitment. It's just, am I making a commitment to myself, or am I making a commitment to this relationship? Am I making a commitment to be true to myself, or am I making a commitment to be true to someone else? And how does that bring me back to my integrity so that because you have to let go of something when this happens. It's just like, am I letting go of my own standards? Am I sacrificing? Or like, what kind of letting go is it? Does it feel good, or does it feel like you're compromising yourself to do one or the other? And what is it that you're losing? And for that, I wonder, we've got Mars. I
love that too, just because you said the other day, like sometimes if there is a commitment, you lose people. So any choice we make, we give up other choices. Yeah.
You either lose yourself, you lose a group, or you lose the one individual person, or you could lose two groups, or you could lose two people, or more than that. Like, it just depends on what the dynamic or the triangle is.
What do we let go of in order to commit? Right?
Yeah. What are you letting go of?
I'm quoting you.
Yes, because like, if you're committing, you're letting go of your freedom. But at the same time that like you commit, you can see it as stepping into greater freedom, because you can be public about your commitment. There's a new type of freedom that you get from your commitment, like the freedom of like letting go of your anxiety that you're single, or like, letting go of like, I don't know, there's so much negative shit you can let go of by stepping into commitment. And I had someone say to me recently, commitment has two sides to it. Like, you can be like in a committed partnership to someone where like you're in a monogamous dedicated relationship and see it like that, or you can think about like, I'm being committed to a mental asylum, like in my own head, because I'm stuck inside of this prison of a relationship. And so are you willing to let go of whatever freedom you have as a single person in order to step into a dedicated monogamous relationship? And it doesn't even have to be romantic. Like, it can be, because we're seeing all this like relationship type stuff, but it could also be like at work. Are they asking you to commit because you're being asked to step into a leadership role? Or, and then you have to, if you do that at work, you have to let go of your side hustle, or your ability to date right now, or the hope that you had that you might switch careers or move to another place, or who knows what it is, right?
Yeah. So I had a session with Kay Taylor over the holiday, and and she talked about this tension, the delicate balance of keeping ourselves staying in touch with ourselves in the midst of relationship, and how that it can it can be a challenge. It's so interesting because I keep looking at this Jupiter Juno approaching Chiron, and we've got everything that's going on in this chart. I think is so interesting, and I wonder if we should just look at March 11 right now, because it's so connected. Because the March 11 chart, Vesta has moved to conjoin Jupiter Chiron. Vesta's on that Jupiter Chiron.
For when?
And March 11.
Ah.
And Saturn is sextiling Juno. Mars is sextiling Venus. So this is it's the same sort of combination of positive, Mars sextile Venus, Saturn sextiling Juno. Those are strong commitment, attraction, chemistry sort of aspects.
Wow, I did not even realize that Vesta is going to be conjunct at the same 14 degrees of Chiron that day. When Venus is going to be conjunct Eris as well.
Yeah. And Mars sextiling that Venus Eris. Yeah.
Mars is sextiling it. Yeah.
And look at that Saturn Juno sextile. Perfect there as well. Almost exact.
Oh, yeah. Saturn Juno sextile. It's so interesting. We have so much going on. And Pluto at the anaretic degree of Capricorn within like 15 minutes of moving into Capricorn. When you have something at an anaretic degree, especially Pluto, which already means change and transformation, it's like anxious to get into the next sign. It's like, I'm done with this shit since 2008 in Capricorn. I'm ready to move into Aquarius. Like, let's move quickly. It's like I always say filter faster, because there's a lot of people in the world, and I don't know. I just think our souls right now are definitely at the people who have incarnated right now, meaning everyone who's alive, is here to like do some intense spiritual growth. And if you can filter through people, experiences, whatever faster and get the lesson, like that's what it's all about. And I think maybe a lot of us might be feeling that way. Like, I'm done with this, and I'm right. I see it as a revolving door, kind of. When I say filter faster, that's the image that comes in my head. And this is definitely a moment of change and renewal and new beginnings of so many things.
Potentially commitment. And I just think it's so interesting to sort of look at this chart, because it's January 22nd that Jupiter Juno sets this up so interestingly. And it seems to me that whatever happens in January with that Jupiter Juno, we might see echoes of it with this Jupiter
Absolutely. Chiron. Absolutely. I think every time we see any planet making any aspect to obviously to any planet, but I was thinking specifically, like, we had some Mercury Chiron activations and some Venus Chiron activations, Sun Chiron activations. That's all going to in late December and early January. So the things that have come up late December, early January, like you said, and even like what we were talking about, like mid to late January, is going to come up again once we get to this period in March.
Yeah. And the Jupiter Chiron, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. It sort of feels like if you have some major commitment in January, wait till March, say yes, but don't walk down the aisle kind of thing. Maybe.
I know.
Maybe that's one way to think about it.
The whole world is going to change in March, because Saturn moves into Pisces, Pluto moves into Aquarius. These are things that take 2.5 years, 246 or 48, depending on how you look at it, years. And Jupiter's 12 years. I mean, there's so many long cycles in here. And then the Jupiter Chiron conjunction, that's a 51-year cycle. So it's not. It's in a given sign, it's a 51-year cycle. It's a 13-year cycle. It'll meet up every 13 years in different signs, but it's been 51 years since Jupiter and Chiron have met up in the sign of Aries. And we were not consciously aware of it when it happened last time. And you're right, it's a totally another episode, and I've talked about it a lot, but it's just.
But it is. I do think it's one of the more important conjunctions of 2023.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I like talking about Chiron, because yeah, I don't know that everybody gives Chiron enough credit for the amount of power. Maybe it's the sheer punch in the gut kind of power, but knock you flat on your back power sometimes.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's potential for profound healing with a Jupiter Chiron as well.
Yeah, totally. So it took us back to January because I think we want to talk about Pallas sextile Uranus as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so Pallas is here in Cancer at 13 degrees of Cancer. So I'll progress this. Oh, you know what? It's going to happen sooner because Pallas is retrograde.
The 15th,
Okay. So there we
I
go.
believe.
So we get, or maybe even, we got to get 14. Okay. Yes. So
I do think it's just good to glance at March though in the
oh
context
yeah,
of this of January Jupiter. Okay.
totally. I'm glad we went there.
I feel better.
Yeah, me too. I feel like it's the
Okay.
elephant in the room. Like literally, it's like
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Right.
I literally can't have a conversation without bringing it up. I'm like, yeah, obviously because like of what's happening in March, and then after that, like, and you can see all that stuff is in Aries. In July, the nodes switch into Aries and Libra. That's where we get our eclipses. Eclipses are transformation and change, and I mean, it's just this. The story is like I don't know. It feels like a movie, like an epic saga. And I mean, you could look at any transit like that. Maybe it's just because I'm in a certain period of my life where I'm feeling it and I'm getting hit by a lot of these transits. But like, yeah, I hear the swell of dramatic music, like kind of increasing in volume in the background as I think about like the Venus retrograde in Leo is going to trine all of this stuff. Um, and yeah, in April and May we'll get eclipses in Aries, so it's important. But anyway, Pallas at
Well,
14.
and I would
Yeah.
just say too, like it just make it just to go respond quickly to what you said.
No.
Like I feel like maybe this is about this Jupiter Chiron. I mean, it feels like we're collectively and individually, personally, sort of, um, if we've been on the planet this long, we're integrating all of the lessons of Pluto in Capricorn. As Pluto goes to its final degrees over the next 2 years, in its final passes through Capricorn, that I think 2023 is consolidating everything that's happened since 2008 when Pluto first came in to
Yeah.
Capricorn.
Yep.
And so it could be a time of really, and I would suggest even that if this resonates for you, or you find that, healing is a theme in January, February, March, to really slow down and do whatever you need to just sit with and process grief, change, transformation.
That's a good point. Yeah, especially with Saturn and Pisces, it's all about addressing our grief, creating containers for grief, processing, slowing down, dreaming, healing, feeling compassion for ourselves and others.
And yeah, and so yeah, I imagine was Christopher Renstrom on his 2023 roundup. Said the 2023 and 2024 really they're a kind of warm up for when everything moves into new signs for good in 2025.
Mm.
And so,
I agree
this is a
completely. Like I keep
yeah,
saying, this is sort of like the beginning of the end, but it's also the
yeah,
beginning of the beginning in many ways. And so,
yeah.
because it's a transitionary period, we're in a liminal space. Pisces is a
Liminal
very
space.
liminal sign, and so it's like
Exactly.
our structure is dissolving. Saturn and Pisces structure, Pisces dissolving, so that we can move into a new space, a new era. When Uranus moves into Gemini, we'll definitely have Pluto and Aquarius for good and for sure for 20 years. And Saturn and Neptune will conjoin, which is a big deal.
The next big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a 38-year cycle in any sign, but it has not been conjunct in the sign of Aries since 1771, I think, which was the French Revolution and the American Revolution.
Yeah.
It's a big
Yeah.
deal.
And, Frank Clifford thinks that all of the political unrest is about Pluto being at anaretic degrees. Um,
Yeah.
the
Anoretic and then like
Ukraine.
first degrees too.
Mhm.
Once it hits
So
zero.
it does feel like a bit of a tinderbox politically, potentially for the next couple of years. That is the one concern.
Yeah. And I actually think that's a perfect transition to the Pallas Uranus, because
Let's go back. Yeah, yeah.
Pallas Athena is about our strategy, is one way to look at it, and Uranus is like something unexpected that happens, and a sextile aspect is supportive. So it means that, like, you can strategize, but I love how Rick Levine says Uranus is the instantaneous resolution of irresolvable opposites, but it's also just like something unexpected that happens and you can't plan for it. And Pallas, strategy, usually you have a plan if you're thinking about strategizing, but it's almost like the opportunity that falls from the sky that changes your strategy or supports your strategy in some unexpected way. And
Mm-hmm.
that could be like, if the game changes, that speaks to that Pluto at anaretic degrees, and like the fact that we're in the beginning of this new phase and we're at the end of the old phase, or end of the old era, and now we have to pivot and change our strategy, but it's in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you
I
think
love
about
that. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better with the Pallas Uranus. Of course, Venus squares Uranus on that day as well, so it could be and Black Moon Lilith opposes Venus. Um, yeah. Um, so it's could be. Do you have the?
for
I have for the 15th. I have Venus at 15 Aquarius squaring Uranus at 14 Taurus. Yeah, yeah. Um, so So there's something sort of could potentially incendiary about this day, but that Pallas sextile Uranus might help you slide through it if you use your wits. Fly by the seat of your pants, go with the flow, kind
Yeah.
of.
So tell us like about Black Moon Lilith.
Oh gosh. This is a big topic. How about we brush the surface and then we
That's
continue to
fine.
delve? Yeah, I love the idea of
Just
like to go
just like
one asteroid an episode. Is there
we do.
others was this will be 6 hours long. But we already talked about Juno in depth. But so Black Moon Lilith opposite Venus. Venus could either soften Black Moon Lilith, or Black Moon Lilith could make Venus a little wild in this case. Um, and Black Moon Lilith is a mathematical point, not an actual body in the sky, based on it's actually considered it's the point, it's the apogee of the moon is Black Moon Lilith. So wherever the moon is in the sky at any given moment, where the exact opposite of that location is considered to be Black Moon Lilith. But it's a mathematical point and it moves around quite a bit. It's unstable and chaotic, kind of like Black Moon Lilith energy. And uh, and so with Uranus squaring this opposition, this is just a very unstable energy. Um, I would say. If you feel like you want to break up with somebody or cause an argument, don't give into it on this day. Wait a day or two and see how you feel, because it could just be this day that's really setting you off. Um,
Yeah.
use your detachment with Pallas and hold
That's a
up
good
for a day or
point.
two.
It's a
See
good
how you
point.
feel.
Yeah. um
Uh,
because sometimes it's not their fault, but it's like, it's just something happens, it's going to piss you off a little bit, and you might want to like get get what's a good word? I don't know what a good trendy word is, but like, yeah, wild or like loud or argumentative, or like, I just have to tell you how I feel about this, but don't do it until you're like, and I'm over it. Like, I had some feelings about it and I worked through it and I realized that what's important is X. but Lilith was Adam's wife, and
Astrology has helped me avoid so many arguments that I would have regretted starting, like
because you could see Lilith and where it was.
or Mars a lot of times
Yeah.
for me,
Oh, I like
whatever.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Mars is still stationary in this chart. Mars is at 8 degrees, 9 minutes of Gemini, and Mars was retrograde for 2.5 months. It's been in Gemini, which is a sign of,
The longest Mars
communication.
retrograde ever, it feels like.
It does feel like it, yeah. Um, it's
It's
just
gonna
been
be at
hard.
8 for like another 10 days or something. Something ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do the math in my
Move
head.
on, Mars. Move on.
It's like it's almost quintile, like 72 degrees, because it's sextile is 60 plus 767. So there was a quintile of Black Moon, Lilith, and Mars. So it's almost like a like a magic rage. Like a magic way of saying, I will not submit to you and your niceness and how much you love me, Venus, or what you're asking from me and what
You
you
know, would be yeah, would be really might be interesting is to look at the if we want to talk about Black Moon Lilith, is to check out the January 21st new moon because
Oh yeah.
that's opposite at a 3-minute orb. Like,
Wow.
yeah. And this one has it's Venus still conjunct Saturn and Juno Jupiter still still hanging out with each other
Yeah,
as well.
so we've got a 5 minute orb with Black Moon Lilith retrograde, that's why it's red, and then 1 degree 30 minutes for Black Moon Lilith and 1 degree 35 minutes for the sun and the moon in Aquarius.
Yeah, yeah. So Black Moon, I mean, you're going to tell the story. You tell the story.
I mean,
Lilith
you'll
was
have to fill in some gaps for me, but like, we're looking at the Bible, the Old Testament, and Adam, the first man, and before Eve was made of God's rib, God made Adam and Lilith, and Lilith was Adam's first wife, and she didn't want to be subservient to him, and so she was then cast out. And there's a lot of sexual implications or overtones or innuendos with like the not wanting to be subservient to him, but that's long story short about it. And so
some
then,
sources literally say that she refused the missionary position.
right, yeah,
They couldn't decide who was going to be on top.
yeah. So I mean, and you could extrapolate that to be like metaphorical, right? Like, and that happens, like who's the strong one in relationship, and like, but yeah, there's the thing about like we can't negotiate or we can't like find an agreement, and it does speak to like the end of matriarchy and the beginning of patriarchy. And so then she was cast out of the Garden of Eden, and then Adam was like, yo, I need someone. And God was like, all right. And he's like, but I don't want any of this headache anymore. So he made Eve out of his rib, which is kind of nasty, No shade to Eve, but like, like that's a clone. Like you just took a clone out of yourself and made it so that you don't have to be bothered with trying to compromise or negotiating or doing relationship in ways that is helpful, are helpful. So that's what I know about Black Moon Lilith. It's like where we refuse to be pushed around or subservient or told what to do. And in the sign of Leo, um, Leo's a fire sign. Fire signs are intuitive. Leo's a fixed fire sign, so it's a bit stubborn. It's gonna kind of stand its ground. And Leo's also very courageous and heart-centered, and it will pull attention to it as well. So it's like if you decide you're not gonna be pushed around, it'll feel like a big deal and pretty irritating, potentially.
I love that. And And we've been talking about relationship this whole time on some level.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have, Black Moon Lilith oppose this. Um,
That's an interesting conversation we can have at some point too. Is like,
New moon.
are the asteroids, are the dwarf planets about how they relate to other people more so than the planets are? Because the planets have their own meanings a lot, and they of course have stories of like how they met each other and how they were created. But I think more so it seems like the asteroids are about their origin story, their meaning is defined by their relationship, whether it's how they were
I
born or
Yeah, I wouldn't go quite that far. I think that when you dig into the goddesses, you realize that they have tremendous value to the communities that they um were the patronesses for. Um, Vesta as the keeper of the hearth. Um, the story there is every home had some tribute to Vesta. This is where we get the phrase with the home hearth. What is it?
Vestal fire, the home and the hearth. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Vestal,
And
yeah. A
the hearth
vestibule?
as the home, the
A
hearth
vest,
as the home, and
yeah.
vestibule. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it must be related. But the hearth as the home, it's the sacred flame, keeps everybody warm and cozy. Um, and um, Investa also represents the actual physical home. And I've seen that more times than I could possibly count. That Vesta is active in a home sale or closure, or any kind of real estate moving. Um,
Yeah.
so so yeah. So when you start to dig into the meanings of each of these, and Juno as a protector of the community, and Pallas named for Athena, Pallas Athena, the goddess of war. Um, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, every other page there's Pallas Athena. There's some kind of invocation of Athena, um, goddess of wisdom and strategy in war. So where Mars is the sort of might makes right, hit him over the head and get your way. Pallas I always think of as more about the strategy of a chess game. It's like acting in such a way that maybe you don't even need to get on the battlefield and you win. You
Yeah.
win by so yeah, I think that they're multifaceted. Um, you
That's
know,
fair.
and Lilith went on to and I think it's interesting to note that these stories are actually apocryphal. They're not in the Bible. Lilith, I think, is mentioned in the Bible. Maybe the word appears one time.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
so they're not actually in the Bible, but I tried to dig into this um, a while back, and from what I could tell, from what I found from one particular source, it was a encyclopedia of Jewish mythology and folklore, um, where I found that the first mention of this story of Lilith being the first wife of Adam and um, originated potentially in the Middle Ages, as late as the Middle Ages, like
Hmm.
12, 1400 or something, maybe
Interesting.
1000 AD. Yeah. So quite late. Um, but the story with her is that she rejected traditional marriage and like, not for me, thank you. And then she went on to become the mother of a bunch of demons. Um, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Um,
which isn't
and so
nice.
they no, not nice. No, this is the um, this is the part where we exile the rebel in ourselves and in society. Um, right?
Oh yeah, I remember you saying that.
We push it out, right? And then it becomes a demon, and we demonize it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so the parents would make amulets against Lilith because the myth was that Lilith would come and steal babies. Lilith and her demons would come and steal babies. And you think about it, this, sudden the SIDS or whatever, sudden infant death syndrome, so many reasons little babies could die in the
Right.
Middle Ages. So they would make amulets to protect against Lilith.
Interesting. And I remember you were saying something about like being the only one having a seat at the table, and Lilith being prominent in charts like that. Like because you feel exiled somehow, you feel like the person who stands alone, um by just being you or by standing up for what you believe in or whatever the case may be, right?
Well, and so Dawn, the teacher I mentioned I studied with, she called um, Lilith a dark goddess. There's this tradition of the dark goddesses, um, Hecate, Kali, Lilith. This sort of the destructive feminine, um, and so there's a long tradition here that I think this all ties into. There's of these archetypes that I think are really fascinating and profound,
Yeah.
and I'm but with Lilith in particular, it's almost like, so Lilith was this powerful outsider. She was like, I don't need you, God and Adam. F off. No, I'm not going back.
Yeah.
Like, so she's a powerful outsider, which I love. And so I kind of think of that sometimes when I see Lilith prominent in a chart.
Which is
The
also
idea.
very Saturnian, but they're actually opposite archetypes in terms of that being on the outside, because Saturn is the exile that rejects overt sexuality, because Saturn would send people to the outskirts of the town, um, like the farmers and stuff like that, who were not allowed in Jupiterian man-made government, because the temple was a place where sexual acts were performed, because it was about fertility rituals. And so these people, you would assume that they'd be like masculine people or people who were just like not sexual or interested in that. And then you've got this more wild Lilith that's on the outside because it was too sexual somehow, or like too taking control of the sexuality, and the fertility by being fertile with demons or something like that. It's very interesting to think about that.
There's so much we could do, and that's why I look at Lilith in the chart, because I just think it's profound. But yeah, and Saturn as sort of internal structure, and Lilith as the 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 powerful outsider, potentially destabilizing Saturn.
Yeah.
um you know but I love that, Pluto was just knocked off, no longer a full planet, but we have Eris, um who, as we discussed, is about the same size as Pluto.
Yeah. And then I think the last one we wanted to talk about today was Pallas square Chiron. So Pallas again is strategy and Chiron is the wound, but Chiron is also like um charisma. So I wonder if we see a strategy on behalf of an individual personality Aries who's very charismatic, their strategy not working for them the way that they wanted it to work. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me. So that starts January 20. Oh, I'm doing minutes. No wonder it's not moving ahead. Uh, so January 27th that begins, and it'll be active through January 30th. So we're looking at Chiron at 12 degrees of Aries and Pallas at 12 degrees of Cancer.
And Mercury opposite that Pallas as well.
Ah, yeah. So this is a
So
T
we've got,
square, really.
mm-hmm, yeah.
Um,
um I so Mercury opposite Pallas is like is wisdom, insight around communication. It's swift thinking, wise thinking to me. um Square Pallas, it's so interesting because with Chiron, a square can be worse. But I almost feel like sometimes with Chiron, the aspect doesn't matter. If Chiron's going to hurt you, hurt no matter what, if it's a trine or a sextile.
Yeah.
But
it's whether it's more healing or more painful. And sometimes with healing, you have to notice the pain in order to be triggered to take action to heal it. But usually if it's like a trine or a sextile, it's going to be like an opportunity that presents itself, such as like a person coming to you who reminds you of who you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago, and you being able to lend some wisdom to them and that feeling good, but it still brings up the pain, but it's not as painful for you anymore. Whereas like a square and opposition or like a quincunx is going to, or like different challenging aspects are going to be like an activation of the pain again, or the wound, or like the situation that just feels like it can't heal. It's like, this again, really, this again.
I think with the Pallas and Chiron in particular, there can be like, in Mercury here, this is like, to me, this feels like a challenge around communication. So Pallas square Chiron, like Chiron squaring Pallas can be, maybe somebody makes you feel dumb. Somebody makes you feel like one day,
Yeah.
you have this confidence in your intelligence, your ability to communicate, but Chiron squaring this Mercury Pallas opposition, this could be a day where there's some kind of wound around communication.
I think yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, Mercury in Capricorn is someone speaking in the government, and 12 degrees of Capricorn, there are millennials that have Neptune here and millennials that have Saturn or Uranus here. So it could be like AOC or like a millennial in the government is either being talked to or about, or they're the speaker. And then opposite, some strategic maternal caring figure who's like, hey, do you care about me or not? Which could be the people, because where's the moon? The moon's in Aries. So the moon's like not really doing stuff, but Cancer's ruled by the moon. And so I wonder if it's like the people are then saying to like AOC or someone, or to the government, to the Speaker of the House, like, do you care about me? Because do you recognize my Chiron pain on an individual level? And that being more of like something happening in government where like either someone tries to address it and it backfires, or they try to do their best and they just Chiron can't win. They can't fix it. And then they get called on the carpet, and it's just, I almost feel embarrassment here. Like it just feels kind of embarrassing and misunderstood, and like you just can't win because Mercury opposite, it's like I'm saying the thing that needs to be said, but the over here, the Cancer and the Chiron is like not feeling it. I don't care what you say, you just put your foot in your mouth. So you can go F yourself and put that where the sun don't shine, because that's how I feel about you right now.
And I think this is Chiron's last pass. It was at 12. I think this is the third time it's hit 12
I think
Aries.
so.
It's like,
yeah.
thank gosh it's out of here, man. Because but I do feel like Chiron wounds like this can be humiliating, be embarrassing, but that Mercury opposite Pallas is very intelligent if um if it can stay on its feet, if it can
Pivot.
keep its presence of mind, and so I think the key with a Chiron wound is to first like fully embrace it. Just be like, I'm gonna feel this pain. I'm gonna take a bath in it, literally. To not try to avoid it. Sounds counterintuitive, not always easy to do, but if you can allow, like, just let it, like, sit with it. Chiron brings up if these deep wounds, that if we allow them the chance, if we give them some air, when we get pinged in day-to-day life, if we give them some air, we can heal them slowly over time in these little dings, these little daily humiliations and embarrassments. It's sort of like, here to me, the Pallas opposite Mercury says, stay confident, you're intelligent, you can do it. Have faith in your wisdom and your strategic ability, your ability to think and communicate. There might be a wound here that's brought up.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting. I just am going to pull up the next time that Pallas and Chiron are square because we could see Pallas retrograde there. And because it's retrograde, it means like it's not like they're all just moving forward. It means that we come back to this and we come back to it March 19th. Look at that, March again. And so that's when Mercury has moved on. So Mercury's not in the T square, but where has it moved to? It's moved to 1 degree of Aries. So it's like, all right, I'm still in it, but I'm, this is like a 13-degree orb. So it's kind of far. Um, so Mercury's separating from a square to Mars. So there was some sort of thing that happened maybe 4 days earlier or so where Mercury and Mars come to an altercation, and then Pallas meets up with Chiron again by a square and says, all right, I'm ready to put in the work. I've thought about it. I've strategized. I reflected and
dealt with my wound. Like I felt those wounds
and
I grew from them.
Here's the
Healed.
strategy we're gonna take. And that moon is in Pisces conjunct Saturn, and so it is compassionate, but it's also practical and realistic. And it could be, you could see this as like a tangible Saturn, compassionate Pisces, and moon resolution to what's going on. Like the strategy is going to be a compassionate law for women, or it's going to feel better.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, the point I love about Saturn and Pisces is that the last time, the two previous times Saturn and Pisces, I believe it was in the late 90s, just when the gay civil rights movement started to heat up. And this is the time before that was the 1960s, the era of free love. Like Saturn and Pisces, free love. No
Ooh.
boundaries.
Yeah, boundaryless love, boundaryless
Yeah.
Pisces. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I hope that it might finally be the end of COVID somewhere coming soon where we can all hug each other again.
Yeah.
Freely.
Yeah.
But
So I think yeah.
I have high hopes for Saturn. It could be wrong, but I'm hopeful for Saturn and Pisces.
Yeah. So I think I'll stop sharing now if that works for you.
Yeah.
So we talked about a lot. We talked about the asteroids. We gave a little like what we think about each of them and how they are affecting us. And so, if I think for me, I'm curious how you would sum up like the rest of January. But for me, what I'm getting from it is vibes about addressing. Like we're gonna feel things in order to accept the invitation of addressing them. We're stepping into a moment of change. We might not know what's coming exactly, but we'll be presented with some unexpected, hopefully good opportunities to move forward and strengthen ourselves in ways that we can be in greater integrity and move towards greater compassion and honor individual sovereignty in a more caring way.
Maybe take part in our friendly neighborhood political protest.
Yeah. And also like think about our partnerships and think about what we're sacrificing and what we want to commit to, whether that's in a social contract or a personal relationship, and how that contributes to our own well-being and relational and or societal well-being. So I would encourage folks to be brave, be courageous, YOLO. Why not be brave when YOLO? And take a chance, take a chance, because like if you decide to commit to something, you can always back out, like we said. But if you don't give it a shot, I mean, shoot your shot and then take the shot, unless there's like, I don't know, some huge reason not to. But like, don't
like that.
don't like, they say the thing that people most regret on their deathbed is the thing that they didn't do. So I would say go for it. Like do the thing, because at least you had the experience and you learned from it. And you can look back and be like, do you know that I flew to South Africa for a person or a protest, or, you know, you have a great story to tell.
Yeah.
What's your story going to be if you
Business
say no?
idea.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you know, there was like the one that got away, or like, you know, I could have gone to South Africa and I just didn't. I could have gone to the protest and my photo would have been in the paper and I would have a news clipping to show my great grandkids when I'm 90, but I didn't do it because I was scared.
What if Meghan didn't go to Botswana with Prince Harry?
That's what I'm saying. Go take your loved one to Africa.
A week after meeting him or something, is a month.
Your cute date with you to Africa and fall in love. That's what I'm saying.
I know. Love it. And and just yeah, and so this day we've been talking about, you know, January 22nd is the Juno Jupiter conjunction, Venus Saturn conjunction. 3 days after, the sun sextiles Jupiter, and 2 days after that, Venus moves into Pisces. So these are hopeful.
It's sweet. It's hopeful. It's sweet. Yeah, it's an opportunity. Jupiter sextile sun opportunity for your future, Pisces, Aquarius.
Very romantic also.
Yeah, and then Venus and Pisces, very romantic. Like, I'm letting down my guard, Pisces, to be in relationship Venus with you.
Right. You know, because if you're going to take the leap, this month is a great time to take the leap. Because,
yeah,
you know, because I was going to ask you, like, you're better at the math. So the Jupiter-Juno conjunction happens, is it 3 times every 12 years? If Juno's orbit is
Juno's
4 years?
At 4.3 years, and Jupiter's every 12 years. So by the time Juno makes its return, 4.3 years, Jupiter's ahead just a little bit. So I would say Jupiter Juno's about 5 years, just doing the math in my head roughly.
Yeah. It's a big day. Once in a 5-year transit.
And I will say another thing happening in March, that Jupiter Chiron conjunction is Prince William and his wife, Kate, when they got married. I guess is she a princess now? I don't know, Duchess, princess, whatever. But it's the Jupiter return of their marriage, and so I wonder if we'll see like a nice moment with them in the news with the Jupiter Juno, and then when Jupiter Chiron comes out, maybe a response to Prince Harry's book Spare comes out and kind of says, well, you know what happened on that day? Mm-hmm. You know where I was.
Well, and the Jupiter return maybe is even related to the coronation. So when is the coronation? It's coming up.
I have no idea. Not a clue.
I don't know if it's the spring or the summer, but
yeah,
we will soon have a King Charles.
Yeah.
The however many.
Yeah. I feel like it's the third. I just made that up though. I don't know what it is.
I have no idea. Yeah. But I mean, and they will become the next, you know, they will become what Charles has been for 5 decades, 6 decades now.
Very interesting.
So the next in line for the throne. I mean, if that's not a Jupiter return, I don't know what is.
Yeah. All right. So January, shoot your shot. Take the opportunity. YOLO. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. That's from the astrology. That's like it. Ben Stiller was singing that in some stupid movie. In case anyone wants a reference.
Wedding Crashers. That's a good movie though.
Yeah.
It
was like in some 70s disguise. Anyway, all right. Any last thoughts from you?
No, but if people have thoughts for us, comments, questions, they're interested in any clarifications, we want to hear. We'd love to hear from everybody.
Chat, comments, YouTube, put it in the comments, blog, comments. Kris, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So I am online at, you can go to my website. It's Journey Woman Astrology. So my website is journeywomanastrology.com. And you can book a session there.
Awesome.
If you feel so moved,
because you
And I
are a
would be
consulting
delighted.
astrologer and you do
Yes.
consultations and you integrate the asteroids. And Kris has read my chart and she's fabulous. So I highly recommend you talking with her. And do you do in person or just online right now?
If someone's in the Hudson Valley, um, I'm in upstate New York. Um, I would be happy to meet with them if there's a way to figure it out. But Zoom does tend to be easier at the moment.
Awesome. Awesome.
So,
And for me, I would say get my 2023 year ahead report. I've got videos, I've got PDFs for every planet, for every rising sign, and for every month. So there's a ton of information. You can get all 12 and sign up for my newsletter, taylorshuler.com. Like, subscribe, share the podcast and the YouTube, and hit the bell on YouTube so that you get notified about all the next couple episodes. We'll be back next month with another asteroid slash dwarf planet slash other things update, which is super fun. And we'll see what's happening in February, the month of Valentine's Day and Aquarius season and Pisces
exactly.
season.
And I will soon have a guide to the asteroids on my site.
Oh,
So
yes. Awesome. So yeah, subscribe to Kris newsletter and
download.
and then you'll get that when it's available. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you again next time. Bye now. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to find more heart-centered, forward-thinking folks just like you. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it in your Instagram stories, and tag me at Taylor Shuler Astrology. If you're interested in an astrology consultation with me, you can book online at my website, taylorshuler.com. If you like my digs and you're looking for short-term furnished rentals because you're a digital nomad like me, or just because, don't forget to use the link in the show notes or code Taylor_C6I at hellolanding.com for $250 off your rental. See you next week. Bye.